The air was crisp and thin at 10,400 feet on the slopes of the active volcano where Carl stood. His breaths came in short, labored gasps, a familiar sensation for any seasoned climber, but this time something felt off. Carl Landers wasn't your average 69-year-old man. He was adventurous, daring, and strong. In his hometown in Orinda, he was a regular distance runner, an avid climber, and a member of the Orinda Roadrunners. Carl had climbed Mount Whitney, hiked the Grand Canyon, and made several other climbs in Utah and California. He planned to climb the highest peak in every California county, including today's first location, Mount Shasta. One of the most famous myths surrounding Mount Shasta in Northern California is that it is inhabited by ancient, highly advanced beings known as the Lemurians. According to this legend, the Lemurians survived the destruction of their civilization by retreating into the underground tunnels beneath this active volcano, where they continue to reside to this day. Locals also portray this volcano as a dwelling of the Great Spirit, a gateway to other dimensions, and home to beings of light and earth guardians. Since these stories emerged, over a dozen people have disappeared while trying to reach the volcano's peak. Carl wasn't one to be discouraged by myths and folktales. He had climbed the mountain before, only that time he didn't reach its peak due to bad weather and poor health. This time was going to be different. He was more prepared, and he wasn't returning home without reaching the summit. Carl set out to conquer Mount Shasta with his friends and Orinda residents, Milton and Barry. They planned to take the Avalanche Gulch route, the most popular path to the summit of Mount Shasta. While the Avalanche Gulch route wasn't the most technical, it had steep inclines and the potential for sudden weather changes, making it a bit challenging. Undeterred, the group started their ascent from Bunny Flat, an elevation of 6,950 feet. The first leg of their journey was to reach Helen Lake, a major stopping point at about 10,400 feet, where they would set up a high camp. From there, they planned to rest and acclimate to the altitude before making their final push to the summit early the next morning. The ascent from Helen Lake to the summit involves navigating a series of steep snowfields and exposed sections, requiring careful attention and steady progress. Despite their detailed planning, the group was well aware of the unpredictable nature of mountain environments. They had packed all necessary gear, including crampons, ice axes, and sufficient provisions, ensuring they were prepared for any eventuality. However, as the ascent progressed, Carl began to experience symptoms of altitude sickness, also known as acute mountain sickness, a common but potentially serious condition caused by the reduced oxygen levels at higher elevations. Despite his worsening condition, Carl persevered, refusing to lose to the mountain again. He shrugged off his nausea and even set out for Lake Helen before any of his mates. He planned to get a head start, and Barry and Milton would meet up with him. After all, the lake was visible from where they had camped. Weak, sick, and cold, Carl pushed on to Lake Helen while Barry and Milton packed up camp. This was the last time anyone would see Carl Landers. Mount Shasta proved too much for Barry. He returned to Bunny Flat from Camp 5050. He felt sick, and instead of pushing on like Carl, he made his way back, leaving Milton to complete the journey to Lake Helen. When Milton reached Lake Helen, he found no trace of Carl, and immediately he knew something was wrong. He searched for Carl, but his only lead was a forest ranger who claimed to have seen an older man asking for paths, but even the forest ranger wasn't sure if the man he saw was indeed Carl Landers. There were many hikers, and as day turned to night, Milton feared the worst. He returned to Camp 5050 and immediately called on the Sheriff's Department for a rescue team. The Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department started searching immediately, enlisting the assistance of a California National Guard air ambulance helicopter and a California Highway Patrol helicopter equipped with an infrared sensing device. A ground search began the next morning with U.S. Forest Service rangers and volunteers on skis and foot. The search for Carl Landers was intense and thorough. Rescue teams braved harsh weather conditions, including snow and freezing temperatures, to cover as much ground as possible. They followed the Avalanche Gulch route, the most logical path Carl would have taken, and expanded their search to adjacent areas in case he had wandered off course. Unfortunately, their efforts were futile. In June 1999, the search was officially called off, with the case remaining inactive due to a lack of new leads. Carl, who was wearing 2 to 3 layers of clothing, including a rust-colored coat, ski pants, and hiking boots with crampons, was never found to this day. His body, his clothes, and his life were lost to the wilderness. Mount Shasta rises to an impressive elevation of 14,179 feet, 4,322 meters. It stands prominently as the southern end of the Cascade Range, towering over the surrounding landscape. Many have lost their lives traversing the mountain's slippery and icy slopes from falls, bad weather, and loose rocks. The mountain is also known for its diverse ecosystem, which supports a variety of plant and animal life. The surrounding area is home to wildlife like deer, mountain lions, and black bears. The lack of any trace of Carl raises the question of what happened on that mountain. Did someone take advantage of the remote location to commit an undetected crime? Or was it the work of something even more sinister and beyond our understanding? Prabdeep Sran was an experienced hiker and a Canadian soldier with a passion for outdoor adventures. He was fit, reliable, and full of optimism. He had only recently returned from his hometown in Canada to Australia to complete his education as a law student. He enjoyed a physical challenge, and Kosciuszko National Park, known for its stunning landscapes and challenging trails, was Prab's ideal setting. The park is renowned for its unpredictable and often severe weather conditions. Sudden snowstorms, heavy fog, and rapidly dropping temperatures make it pretty difficult to navigate, especially during bad weather conditions. However, the tales of danger that lurked around Kosciuszko National Park didn't bother Prab in the slightest. His background in the Canadian Army Reserve had equipped him with valuable survival skills and a strong sense of discipline. Prab had previously undertaken numerous hiking and camping trips, both in Canada and abroad, demonstrating his capability to navigate and endure challenging terrains. His military training had also planted a thorough understanding of safety protocols and the importance of being prepared for unexpected situations in the wilderness, but no amount of preparation could have saved him. Before setting out, Prab carefully researched the park, studying maps and trail guides to familiarize himself with the routes and potential hazards. He chose a route that would allow him to explore some of the park's most scenic and remote areas, aiming to immerse himself fully in the natural beauty and tranquility of the Australian wilderness. On May 13, 2013, Prabdeep hired a van, bought chips and food at a gas station, and headed for Kosciuszko National Park. He met a park staff, Sarah, who warned him about the weather but gave him a one-day pass when he told her he planned to stay at the Kosciuszko Mountain Retreat that night. Prab set out for the Charlotte Pass, a popular starting point for many hikes within Kosciuszko National Park. He had parked his rented van near the staff quarters of Charlotte Pass Ski Resort, and it wasn't until 6 days later that one Michael Hopkins reported that Prab was missing. Prab was no stranger to the wilderness, but this time, the wilderness would become a stranger to him. Hopkins was a caretaker at the resort, and when he first noticed the van, he thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual for tourists and bushwalkers to park around that spot, so he went on with his business. There was a bad storm that day, just as Sarah had predicted, and over the next few days, heavy snowfall blanketed the area. Hopkins noticed no footprints or signs of activity near the van. He observed that there was no condensation on the windows, suggesting no one was sleeping inside. By Saturday, May 18, 2013, as the weather improved, Hopkins inspected the van more closely and saw a national parks permit valid for only 1 day. Concerned, he called the van rental company, who informed him that the van was overdue and they couldn't contact the driver. Hopkins knew that something had gone wrong, so he called the police. Efforts to contact the van rental company were initially unsuccessful, but it was soon confirmed that Prabdeep had rented the van. The search for Prabdeep Sran, missing in the vast and rugged expanse of Kosciuszko National Park, was extensive, but as Prab had gone solo, the search party had little to no clue where to look. The search for Prabdeep Sran involved a significant and coordinated effort from multiple agencies, all working tirelessly under challenging conditions to find any trace of the missing hiker. Police officers from New South Wales, Victoria, and the Australian Federal Police, many of whom had specialized training in alpine conditions, formed the core of the search operation. In addition to the police, over 34 staff members from the National Parks and Wildlife Service, NPWS, of the Southern Ranges region were actively involved in various roles, including search operations, support, management, and technical tasks. The aerial search component was robust, utilizing a variety of helicopters to cover large areas of the park. This included police helicopters from NSW Polair and an AFP-contracted helicopter, as well as additional support from Southcare, Lifesaver 3, and a private contractor from Jindabyne. These aircraft, equipped with advanced technology such as thermal imaging cameras, scanned the landscape for any signs of Prob Deep, but all efforts proved futile. What the search team didn't know was that Prob was doomed from the start. The only things Prob knew about the park he got from the NSW Parks and Wildlife Service website. The paths to follow, the distance, the average time it took to complete a hike, and all that. They were all there, but Prob chose the Main Range Trail. The Main Range Trail is not the hardest route to follow. If anything, it was a popular choice for many who have completed the hike. However, the details about the path were wrong. The site reportedly indicated that it was a 12.5 kilometer, 4.5 hour walk, when it was actually a 22 kilometer, 8 to 9 hour walk. For Prob, the walk has now taken 10 years. There has been no trace of his body or the jeans and jacket he wore on his final adventure. Since then, his family has spent over $400,000 frantically searching for their boy. This final disappearance is even more bizarre than the last two and was captured by surveillance footage. In the summer of 2014, Lars decided to vacation in Bulgaria with a group of close friends. The trip was filled with excitement and anticipation as they looked forward to sunny beaches and vibrant nightlife. The first few days were everything they had hoped for, relaxing on the beach, enjoying local cuisine, and soaking in the vibrant atmosphere of Varna. The group was only in town for a week and was expected to leave on July 7, 2014. Time went by quicker than they may have liked, so a day before they returned home, Lars and his friends decided to visit a popular bar, a decision that would change their lives forever. Lars was very passionate about football. He was a staunch supporter of the German club Werder Bremen. He wasn't one to easily get into a fight, but he and his friends ran into a group of Germans who supported a rival club and got into a bitter argument with them. Angry, Lars left the bar earlier than his friends, and they allegedly didn't see him until the next morning, the day of their departure. When he returned, he looked beaten and attacked. He had run into the same group of men at the bar, and they or some locals beat him so badly that he fractured his jaw and ruptured an eardrum. Their return trip looked to be in jeopardy as Lars was in no condition to fly, as confirmed by a doctor who went on to prescribe 500 milligrams of the antibiotic cefprozil to prevent his wounds from becoming infected. He was also advised not to travel, and while his friends initially offered to stay back with him, he insisted that they leave without him. He was fine, and he joined them back in Germany. Little did he or his friends know that things were about to take a dark turn. After his friends left, Lars checked into a different hotel. It was cheaper, but closer to the airport, just what he wanted. However, as soon as he settled into his room, he went berserk. First, hotel cameras captured Lars Matank on video, showing him hiding inside an elevator and leaving the building at midnight, only to return hours later. Then, in a whispered, frantic phone call to his mother, Lars claimed that people were trying to rob or kill him. He also sent her a text message, asking about his medication and urging her to block his credit cards. The closed-circuit television cameras in the hotel recorded Lars Matank pacing up and down the halls, peering out of windows and hiding in an elevator. At 1:00 a.m., he left the hotel, only to return about an hour later. His actions during that period remain unknown. The next morning, Lars called his mother again, his voice filled with urgency, telling her that the people pursuing him were getting closer. When it got bright enough, Lars headed for the airport. It was the 8th of July, 2014. When he got to the airport, he headed straight for the doctor's office to check on his injuries, and he was given the go-ahead to fly. Yet he remained nervous and asked about his medications. Lars's last words were, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here," before leaving the doctor's office. He dropped his belongings on the floor and sprinted down the hall. Once outside the airport, security footage showed him climbing over a fence and on the other side, disappearing into a nearby forest. Even though the video of his disappearance has been seen by millions over the internet, Lars has never been seen again. There are speculations that Lars's behavior and disappearance were a result of an untreated mental illness or the effect of the antibiotic the airport doctor prescribed for his injuries. The drug known as cefprozil is a cephalosporin that is known to induce psychotic side effects like fever, shortness of breath, hallucinations, and paranoia. However, the airport doctor, Dr. Kosta Kostov, claims that Lars never filled out a prescription sheet for the drug, so he wasn't even on any meds. On the evening of May 1st, 2010, Susan Cox Powell, a 28-year-old mother of two, vanished without a trace from her home in West Valley City, Utah. Her disappearance has since become one of the most unsettling unsolved cases in recent history, with chilling details that continue to haunt investigators and the public alike. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Susan expressed fear for her safety, particularly regarding her husband, Josh Powell. On the night she vanished, Josh claimed he took their sons on an impromptu camping trip in freezing weather, a story that immediately raised suspicions. In the video released by Susan on July 29, 2008, she is recorded to cover all her bases in case anything happens to her or her family.
This is me, July 29th, 2008, covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible.
Stephen lived much of his life with a camcorder in front of his face. He was prolific, filling boxes with VHS and Hi-8 videocassettes. Many of the recordings were mundane, documenting birthday parties, family trips, or conversations with relatives. Others were outright disturbing. Steve's lens often followed strangers in parking lots. He would record from the cover of his minivan with its tinted windows. His camera would zoom in on the bodies of women and girls without their knowledge. Susan Cox Powell, his daughter-in-law, was one of Steve's favorite subjects to film. When Josh first brought her home, I didn't think much of her, Steve Powell later wrote in his journal. I didn't think she was that pretty or anything. Now I can't take my eyes off her. In 2002, Josh and Susan Powell were kicked out of the apartment they had rented in Tacoma. They moved into Steve Powell's home in South Hill, Washington. The close proximity inflamed Steve's infatuation with Susan, stoking the embers into outright obsession. Steve began following Susan around the house, camera in hand. Steve Powell's journals revealed even more troubling behaviors. He stole Susan Cox Powell's soiled underwear from her laundry basket, replacing the pilfered pieces with duplicates. Steve even used a small mirror to spy on Susan when she used the bathroom. Steve collected Susan's soiled hygiene products from the trash, placing them in plastic baggies that he marked with the date. His journals revealed he recognized this behavior as aberrant. Steve expressed a desire to have Susan for himself. He recounted explicit daydreams focused on his son's wife. He yearned for them to divorce. It's very problematic to be madly in love with your son's wife, Steve wrote on February 24, 2003. I am so madly in love with Susan that I would do something desperate to have her. Susan Powell was a counselor and encouraged Josh Powell to join her, an offer he most often refused. On one occasion, Susan's father, Chuck Cox, attended a session. The counselor observed that Susan was being abused. Chuck told his daughter he agreed. Susan's parents bought her a cell phone in case she ever needed to make a quick escape. They paid the monthly bill to prevent Josh from seeing who she called or texted. Susan opened up to neighbors, relatives, and even the occasional stranger about her troubles. She vented about her husband, how poorly he treated her, and how much she yearned for him to act more like the man she had married. On Friday, June 27, 2008, Susan Powell asked her close friend and neighbor, Kersey Helwell, to come over to the Powell family's home. Susan handed Kersey a stereographer's notebook. Susan then began to recount the worst argument of her marriage to date. She and Josh had just gone through a shouting match over faith and finances. "She was just pacing up and down and really angry," Helwell said. "So angry she couldn't sit still." Susan said the argument rocked her so deeply she felt she needed to document it as evidence. The next day, Susan drafted a handwritten will while at work. In it, she spelled out a fear for her life. "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one," she wrote. "Take care of my boys." Josh had purchased a $1 million term life insurance policy for her. Susan recognized the purchase made little sense, unless he expected something horrible to happen.
On the way over here, I actually did call my attorneys, and they said I should definitely have an attorney.
What's that?
I called my attorneys, which is prepaid legal.
Okay.
And they said that I should definitely have an attorney.
If I didn't read you your Miranda rights, have I?
That's what they said.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then, okay? Do you feel like you're under arrest?
I don't know. I didn't even think it was that. It didn't even sink in yesterday. But I don't know where she's at, and she ain't back yet.
Okay. Okay. So you don't know if you don't know if you feel like you're under arrest or not.
Josh Powell had gone for an unexpected winter camping trip. When Josh returned home with his two sons on the afternoon of Monday, December 7, 2009, he found a detective waiting for him. Debbie Caldwell, the Powell family's daycare provider, had sounded the alarm that morning when the boys, Charlie and Braden, failed to arrive at her home as scheduled. Police learned neither Josh nor Susan had shown up for their shifts at work. Calls to both of their cell phones had gone straight to voicemail. Officers feared the whole family might have been overcome by carbon monoxide gas. They had broken a window to gain access to their home. Officers found no sign of a struggle. They noticed the family's minivan was missing from the garage, and Susan's purse was sitting on the dresser. In the living room, two box fans were blowing air at a damp spot on the couch. It appeared as though the couch had recently been cleaned. When the investigators sprayed a product called Blue Star Forensic on the couch, which can reveal the presence of bloodstains, even many that are not visible to the naked eye. A small swipe mark glowed blue on the headrest of the couch. DNA testing later confirmed the blood had come from Susan Powell. Josh said he had left his home between 1:30 and 2 a.m. that morning, driving his minivan down the Pony Express Trail. Josh said he had pulled off to the south side of the dirt road and made camp at about 4 a.m. He had slept until about 7 a.m., then woke up and started a fire to make s'mores with Charlie and Braden. That's when he said he had realized it was Monday, not Sunday, and that he had missed work. Instead of rushing home to beg forgiveness, he had wandered all over the place with the boys. Josh Powell told Detective Ellis that he had stopped to wash his minivan at a car wash on the way home from the camping trip. Josh Powell's story seemed a poor alibi. After all, what father takes his 2- and 4-year-old children out of bed at 2 a.m. to go camping in sub-freezing cold? While Josh was getting investigated, another detective had Josh's boys, Charlie and Braden. During a forensic interview, Charlie Powell told another detective that his mom had gone camping with them, but stayed behind in the place with the flowers and pretty crystals. This case took a tragic turn on February 5, 2012, when Josh Powell committed murder-suicide. He had set his house on fire, killing himself and his two sons during a supervised visit.
Two little boys in the house, and they're 5 and 7, and there's an adult man. He has supervised visitation, and he blew up the house and the kids.
Till this day, investigators continue to search for answers. conducting extensive searches in remote areas where Josh might have disposed of Susan's body, with theories ranging from her body being buried in Utah desert to being hidden in an undisclosed location by Josh before his death. However, no trace of Susan is ever found. And just when you think Susan Powell's case couldn't get any more mysterious, let's dive into another chilling case that will leave you questioning everything. On March 24, 1998, a family trip aboard a Caribbean cruise ship seemed like a great idea. Ron and Iva Bradley, along with their 2 grown children, Amy and Brad, were not able to enjoy the trip for long. Just a few days into their vacation, around 6 a.m., Amy went missing. A frantic search by the family found no trace of her. The cruise line would offer little assistance. Has she been kidnapped? Was she thrown overboard? Where is Amy Lynn Bradley? Amy Bradley was an all-American girl. She was pretty, outgoing, and athletic. And even though Amy was a strong swimmer and a trained lifeguard, she was terrified of the open ocean. According to Amy's mother, Iva Bradley, Amy had to be persuaded to join her family on the Caribbean cruise ship, Rhapsody of the Seas. She had just graduated, and this was supposed to be a celebratory vacation. Amy managed to put her fears aside, and at last chose the cruise life that offered plenty of distractions. On their 3rd night at sea, Amy and her brother Brad partied long and hard at the ship's nightclub. Brad retired to the family cabin around 3:35 a.m., which was recorded by the ship's computerized door lock system. 5 minutes later, Amy followed him back, where Brad says he and his sister then sat on the balcony to talk before he went to sleep. Amy's dad, Ron, said he woke up when she came in and said she was going to sleep on the balcony because she hadn't been feeling too well because of the motion of the boat since they had left Aruba that evening. The next time Ron woke up, Brad had gone to bed and Amy was asleep on the balcony. He could see Amy's legs from her hips down. She looked like she was resting comfortably, so he dozed back off to sleep. The balcony door was closed because Ron said if it hadn't been closed, I would have gotten up and closed it. Just 30 minutes later, their dream vacation turned into a nightmare. As Ron said, about 6 o'clock a.m., something woke me up again. I got up, looked out the balcony, and the balcony door was open, about 14 to 16 inches, and Amy wasn't on the deck. And I had a little funny feeling at that time because it was unlike her to be up that early in the morning. According to him, it wasn't typical of Amy's behavior to go somewhere without telling someone. Ron searched the cruise's common areas for his daughter before waking up his family at 6:30 a.m. to tell them the news. Amy was gone. Amy's family says the ship's crew resisted paging Amy, claiming it was too early to use the loudspeakers. And to make things worse, the ship had just docked in the port of Curacao. The Bradleys claimed the purser didn't broadcast the first page for Amy until 10 minutes to 8 a.m. By then, Amy's mother said most of the passengers had disembarked for the day. Finally, the captain ordered a search. Officials claimed they combed through all 10 decks, all 999 rooms, and found nothing. A 3-day search of the ocean also failed to turn up any trace of Amy. The official conclusion: Amy may have fallen overboard or even jumped. The Bradleys began to piece together Amy's last hours on board the ship. She left the balcony between 5:30 and 6 o'clock a.m. They know she changed her clothes. They know she took her cigarettes and lighter, but they didn't know where she was going. And then they found a witness. Crystal Roberts said she saw Amy early that morning with the bass player from the ship's band. Others claimed that they had seen the bass player flirting with Amy the night before. Authorities never found any evidence that the bass player was involved with Amy's disappearance. Then, according to Steve Reeves, the editor of a cruise line trade publication, a disturbing new theory emerged. There's rumor and legend surrounding slavery in the Southern Caribbean. It's not uncommon knowledge in the maritime community that young white women are considered to be very desirable to foreign procurers. Amy's mother believed her daughter was a perfect target. To this day, Amy Lynn Bradley's whereabouts remain unknown. However, there have been multiple potential sightings of her in the years since, leading to a belief that on that fateful morning, Amy was taken to be sold into human trafficking. On March 24, 2010, 12 years after her disappearance, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead. With no verified witnesses and no remains found, the truth is still uncertain. Currently, to this day, the FBI and the Bradley family is offering a huge lump sum of money for any information that could lead to closure in Amy's case and to her safe return. But the mysteries don't end there. Next, let's uncover Maura Murray's spine-chilling disappearance. On February 9, 2004, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst had left campus earlier that day without telling anyone that she was going to New Hampshire. The 21-year-old Maura Murray vanished in Haverhill that evening, and she was never seen again. Born on May 4, 1982, in Massachusetts, Maura Murray was raised in the nearby town of Hanson. She was often described as an overachiever from a young age. 3 months before her disappearance, Maura Murray was arrested for using a stolen credit card number, but that charge was supposed to be dismissed as long as she maintained good behavior for 3 months. And on February 5, 2004, Murray had an emotional phone conversation with her sister Kathleen, who was struggling with addiction and issues with her fiancé. At the time, Murray was at her campus security job and was so distraught by the call that she had to be escorted back to her dorm. This was just 4 days before Murray vanished. Murray's father, Fred, traveled to Amherst on February 7, 2004. He said that he went car shopping with his daughter and went to dinner with her before he went back to his motel. He then lent Murray his car so she could drive back to her dorm for a party that night. But on her way back in the wee hours of the next morning, she crashed her father's car into a guardrail. Though Murray was unharmed, the car was seriously damaged. However, Fred soon found out that his insurance would cover the cost of repairs as long as Murray picked up the proper forms from the Registry of Motor Vehicles. But the next morning, on February 9, 2004, everything changed. Murray emailed her professors to say that she would be taking a week off due to a death in the family. Her relatives later said there was no death. She also emailed her boyfriend, Bill Rausch. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promised to call you today though. Love you, Maura." Murray called the owner of a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire, where she had stayed before with her family, but she didn't reserve a room. She also called a booking hotline for hotels in Stowe, Vermont, but again, did not reserve a room. By that point, she had also used the internet to look up directions to Burlington, Vermont. It's unclear what her planned destination was meant to be, because she didn't tell anyone where she was going. Around 3:15 p.m., Murray drove to an off-campus ATM and withdrew $280. She then went to a liquor store and purchased about $40 worth of alcohol, including Bailey's, Kahlua, and boxed wine. She also stopped by the Registry of Motor Vehicles and picked up the forms for her car accident. At 4:37 p.m., she placed a call to her own voicemail. It was the last recorded instance that she ever used her phone. At 7:27 p.m. on February 9, 2004, a woman named Faith Westman called the police in Haverhill, New Hampshire, to report a car accident on Route 112. A black Saturn appeared to be stuck in a ditch near her home. The dispatcher thanked her for calling and sent out an officer. By 7:42 p.m., authorities had received another phone call about the accident, this time from a bus driver named Butch Atwood. He reported that the driver was a young woman who appeared to be shaken up, but unharmed. Atwood said that he had offered to call the cops at the scene of the crash, but the woman claimed that she had already called roadside assistance. Still, Atwood called the police anyway once he arrived home, about 100 yards away from the accident. At 7:46 p.m., the first responding officer arrived on the scene, but the mysterious young woman was nowhere to be found. The first officer on the scene found a damaged car, but no driver. The vehicle was locked and the airbags had been deployed. The cop who wrote up the report said, "Evidence at the scene indicated the vehicle had been eastbound and had gone off the roadway, struck some trees, spun around, and came to a rest facing the wrong way in the eastbound lane." The officer continued, "In plain sight behind the driver's seat of the vehicle, I could see a box of Franzia wine. I could also see red liquid on the driver's side door and ceiling of the car. In addition, the cop discovered a Coke bottle that contained a red liquid with a strong alcoholic odor. And there were also printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont. There were no obvious signs of foul play, and there were no footprints in the snow that led into the nearby woods. So the officer first asked Atwood, the last known person to speak with Murray, to give him a hand with the search. Eventually, a state trooper showed up, followed by firefighters in an emergency medical service. While they began combing the area west of the scene, it's believed that no one went east during the initial search. This was one of many things that Murray's father, Fred, who was only informed about his missing daughter 24 hours after the crash, would criticize about how the police handled the search. Police also believe that Murray may have been trying to kill herself, and even put out a press release 2 days after she first went missing that she was possibly suicidal. Her father has denied this suggestion. She was in good spirits and had no worries or reason to run away from her life. A search of her dorm room revealed that she had packed up most of her belongings into boxes before she left. Atop one of the boxes was a printed email to her boyfriend, which detailed problems in their relationship. While Murray had left some of her belongings in her car, a few key items were missing, including her cell phone and backpack. However, her phone was never used again. Any bank account associated with her has remained dormant. And ever since Maura Murray's disappearance in 2004, only alleged sightings, dead ends, and speculative theories have emerged. But for all the theories, we are no closer to finding out what happened to Maura Murray today than we were nearly 2 decades ago. Considering her slim chances of survival, there have been multiple efforts to recover her remains near the scene of the accident, but these have all led to dead ends. On Christmas Eve of the year 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sauter family home was full of joy and celebration as they celebrated the night before Christmas. But things were about to change for them. On Christmas Eve, in the wee hours of that day, a fire tragedy struck the Sauter home. George and Jenny Sauter, with 4 of their children, George Jr., John, Marion, and Sylvia, successfully managed to escape. But 5 of them, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 10, Jenny Irene, 8, and Betty, 5, were believed to have fallen to the worst expected fate because they were never seen again. On that unfortunate night, the fire seemed to have started from George's office at about 1 a.m. Jenny woke up to the smell of something burning and quickly sprung into action to try to locate the cause. Upon reaching the source, she saw her husband's office ablaze, and she could not reach the telephone. Jenny quickly woke her elder daughter, Marion, who had fallen asleep on the couch, to wake up her siblings and get them safely outside. Marion, Silva, and the 2 brothers, John and George Jr., managed to escape. However, their father noticed his other 5 children missing, and he quickly tried to go back in the house to rescue them. George attempted to save them by shattering a window and slashing a slice of flesh off his arm. He couldn't see anything through the smoke and flames that had engulfed almost everything in their wake: the kitchen, the office, and his and Jenny's bedroom. When George tried to go to the attic where his children were, he found the stairs engulfed in flames. George hurried his way out, and with the help of his son John, they tried to use their truck to somehow reach the upper floor, but this attempt was not successful. Marion quickly ran to the nearest neighbor's house to contact the Fayetteville Fire Department, but received no response from the operator. When all the effort to contact the fire department went in vain, the neighbor decided to drive to the town and track down the fire chief, F.J. Morris. The fire department was just 2.5 miles away, but the crew arrived around 8 a.m., by which time the Sodders' house had been reduced to a burning pile of ash. And in the end, the Sodder family could do nothing but watch as the flames engulfed their house and only the foundations remained. Later on, many searches were conducted, yet they could not find any bones or remains of the children in the ashes. The searches concluded that the fire had entirely incinerated their bodies, but the Sodders did not accept this. Following this tragic event, George and Jenny saw several rather eerie events. The telephone wire had been severed, a barrel that was generally placed by the house was gone, and a woman said she saw the children driving by in a car. These odds added up in the minds of the Sodders, and they suspected that their children could have been kidnapped. Frustrated, George and Jenny put up a billboard appealing for information with a considerate amount of money being promised to whoever was willing to help. They also employed detectives, but the mystery was taken to the next level. Informants placed the children at different places, though these leads did not produce any fruitful result. Experts also cited the reports from some relatives that they saw the children with some unknown individuals, further supporting the family's idea of kidnap. Later on, after several investigations, more alarming facts continued to build up. Jenny reported that before the fire had started, she had come across some strange occurrences. Around midnight, she heard the telephone ring. Upon picking it up, she couldn't make out what the other person was saying and wanted to speak to someone who wasn't even a part of their family. Jenny excused herself, saying that the caller had the wrong number, but the caller just laughed and hung up the phone. Later at night, she heard thumps on the roof just before the fire started. The neighbors exclaimed that they had seen fireballs being thrown on the rooftop, which were later discovered to be pineapple bombs, which were used in warfare and could have been the source of the fire. Yet the police were adamant that the fire had started from the severed telephone line. Many theories have arisen following this incident. Some people believe that someone had consciously started the arson and it was not an accident. Other theories surfaced, including the mafia and child trafficking, but no solid evidence has ever been provided. The strange part of the story is that for a long while, people continued to report the sightings of children in different areas, but the searches led to a cold end. 20 years after the accident, another strange event took place. Jenny received an email, solemnly addressed to her. It was postmarked in Kentucky without any return address. Inside the envelope, she found a picture of a man in his mid-20s. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note read, "Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. I lil boys, A90132 or 35. Both the parents couldn't ignore the likeness to their son Louis, who was 9 at the time of the fire. Aside from the obvious resemblance, they shared the same straight, strong nose and upward tilt of the left brow. They once again engaged a private detective and dispatched him to Kentucky, yet they never heard from him again. The truth about this incident was never found, but the story left a haunting impact on the Sodders and its listeners. Was this all planned? Was the fire started deliberately to take revenge on the Sodders? No one seems to have answers or proof to these questions till date. Emanuela Orlandi was a 15-year-old girl from Italy and resided in Vatican City. She was last seen alive on June 22, 1983, leaving for her home after the music lesson. Emanuela had worked at the Vatican with her father, and when she disappeared from one of the most fortified zones in the world, raising concern and suspicions. The Vatican, which is usually very secretive, was right in the middle of a media storm as the search for Emanuela started. The preliminary search was carried out rather quickly, but however proved non-productive. Even with all the inquiries and many supposed leads, there was no real information leading to Emanuela's vanishing. It went viral within a few days, with ideas that she may have been kidnapped by a rival, or perhaps it was a political scheme. Some people suggested that Emanuela disappeared in the framework of a political operation, similar to when Mehmet Ali Agca attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II in 1981. On the final day anyone saw her, Orlandi contacted her sister after music class to inform her that an Avon Cosmetics representative had offered her a job. When Orlandi did not come home the next day, her parents contacted the instructor from her class and the police. Her inexplicable disappearance was reported as a missing person case that day. A witness first claimed seeing a female matching Orlandi's description enter a green BMW near the music school on the night of her abduction, but this information proved useless. Shortly after this disturbing revelation was revealed, the Orlandis got an ominous phone call promising to return the daughter, provided the Vatican freed Mehmet Ali Agca, a Turkish man imprisoned for attempting to murder the Pope 2 years previously. Unfortunately, such development also proved unsuccessful. It has been reported that the Rome-based criminal organization Banda della Magliana abducted Orlandi to force the Vatican to repay an unpaid payment. The girlfriend of the criminal organization's boss, Enrico De Pedis, later claimed that De Pedis informed her that Orlandi had been kidnapped and murdered. Over the years, there has been the development of several theories. The intricate scheme implicating Vatican and international triptych conspiracy theory is most famous and widely discussed as the probable cause of Emanuela's disappearance. Some people think that she probably has been a victim of a more targeted crime, which could possibly have been committed by those who are within the Holy City of Vatican. Due to the absence of concrete proof, more hypotheses and conspiracy theories have been created, making the case even more mysterious. The most extreme hypotheses, however, hold that the Vatican, local police, and prominent politicians kidnapped Orlandi and forced her into sexual service. At least, that is what Vatican's leading exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, believes. Amorth was appointed by Pope John Paul II. Amorth argued that the crime had a sexual purpose and that the parties were planned, with the Vatican gendarmerie serving as the recruiter of the girls. The network included diplomats from a foreign embassy in the Holy See. He feels Emanuela became an innocent victim of this circle. That is why recently and even now we see new information on this topic, and the interest in the fate of Emanuela has grown again. In 2018, the Vatican opened its archives, and in a tomb within Vatican City, some bones were found, which, however, were not confirmed to be of Emanuela. Thus, the controversy continues to this present day, because the Vatican and some other governments are still to come out with clear findings. The theories about the Vatican involvement are numerous and complex, with no definitive evidence linking any specific groups to her disappearance. Tara Calico, the 19-year-old college student from Belen, New Mexico, went missing on September 20th, 1988. Tara departed from her house in the morning, intending to go for a bike ride along what she frequently used, New Mexico State Road 47. She had told her mother to look up for her in case she didn't come back till noon. Her mother advised her to take some self-defense items due to the past events of being followed, which were reported by the neighborhood, but Tara declined. Her mother, Patty Doyle, became concerned when she did not come home by noon and went to look for her. She did not see Tara. The only things that remained in spite of her disappearance were parts of the Walkman and a cassette. Even though police and Tara's friends went on quests to search for her, she has never been found. The case then took everyone by surprise. After almost a year, a photograph of a young woman and boy with hands tied behind their backs and a tape on their mouth was found in a Central Florida parking lot. The photograph showed that the boy and girl were lying helplessly in the back of a van. The woman in the photograph looked almost similar to Tara, and this led people to conclude that she had been kidnapped. However, even after dissecting the information in the photo to the minutest aspects and exposing it publicly, the people in the photo have not been identified. Calico's mother, Patty Dwell, believed the photo was of her daughter until her last breath. As the case went unresolved in the age of internet-enabled amateur investigation, the image gained attention under foreboding titles like "A Teen Girl Was Kidnapped," and the only evidence they found of her being alive was a horrifying Polaroid. Authorities, however, were never certain that the photo was related to Calico's case. It was examined at least 3 times, including by the FBI, which believed it was not Calico, but could not be confirmed at the time. Meanwhile, Scotland Yard in the United Kingdom confirmed it was her. According to Lieutenant Rowland, the lead investigator, Calico went missing within a 20-minute window from when witnesses saw her on the road to when her mother went looking for her. Witnesses reported seeing Calico on her bike, but being closely followed by a light-colored old 1950s Ford truck with a camper shell and New Mexico plates. People who had seen her being followed by that truck grouped together and helped the police in putting together the sketch of the driver. The driver was believed to be in his late 30s or 40s in 1988. It described a white or light-skinned man with red or brown hair. However, to this day, neither that driver or the van has been spotted. The motor vehicle in the photo was identified as a van, and information about numerous vehicles began to stream in. However, answers were not as helpful. Calico's family came forward soon, claiming the girl in the photo resembled their lost daughter. Another New Mexico family felt the same way about the little kid, believing it was their missing son, 9-year-old Michael Henley. Later on, Lieutenant Rowland confirmed remains of the boy suspected to be Michael Henley, seen in photograph along with Calico, 2 years later that he had died of exposure in Zuni Mountains. Rowland said that further investigation called into doubt what the Polaroid actually portrayed. For example, the young woman's hands do not appear to be securely bound together, and her shoulders do not appear tense, as they would if her bindings were severe. Rowland noted that there was no redness surrounding the tape in the children's lips, indicating that the tape had not been on their mouths for a lengthy amount of time. To this day, neither the boy nor the girl in the photo have been properly recognized. For the years, there have been so many theories and leads in an attempt to explain what really happened to Tara, but all in vain. Some think she was knocked down by a vehicle, and the incident concealed by those implicated in the act. Some people are forced to theorize that she was kidnapped by strangers and taken to a different and unknown region. The case has had a number of different opinions. However, to date, and despite this, no resolution of the case has been made, and there is no physical evidence. Later on in 2008, the case was reopened by Esquibel, who was a former classmate of Tara and a filmmaker. She wanted to keep the story of Tara forefront, which led her to make a podcast called Vanished, with the aim to help law enforcement. Luckily, the podcast helped. People started coming in and leaving tips and hints, which gathered quite a lot of information the authorities had either skipped or didn't take into consideration. Following this, one of the previous investigators, Flores, brought in some new information. According to investigator Flores, additional investigative papers have been lost throughout the years. He stated that this includes evidence in instances he believes were linked, such as a narcotics ring he was investigating soon before Tara's disappearance at the Rio Communities Motel. He stated that they discovered a vehicle and a luggage with telephone wire, hinting it had been used to tie up someone. Flores also reported how the department casually answered his question when he asked what they had done with the suitcase. They replied, "Oh, we destroyed it." It was possible that they could have found some forensic evidence in it. Even after all these years, he wonders if it was linked. The hotel was close to Tara's final known location. This prompted the people to conclude that the department was corrupt. As for the family, Tara's family has remained very aggressive in their search for the truth. Patty, the mother, believed in the likelihood of Tara being alive and went searching for every lead she came across. This determination still drives the attempts to solve the case even after the death of Patty in 2006. On a warm evening of May 25, 2003, the world saw one of the most bizarre aviation events. This is the story of Ben Charles Padilla, a man of interest in the world of aviation mysteries and missing people for more than 20 years. The crisis started at Angola Airport, known as Luanda's 4 de Fevereiro Airport. Ben Charles Padilla was a mechanical and flight engineer in that airport. He got a job in a Boeing 727-233 and was assigned to fix this commercial airplane that must have known better days. The plane, under registration number N844AA, had not taken to the air for more than a year because it needed high radio frequency and hence was not permitted to take off. For it to be in a condition that was presentable for business, it required repainting, repair work, and overhauling in many areas. Padilla, with the team, was given the challenge of getting it airborne again, which he proceeded to do. But that changed on May the 25th in the year 2003. Something still unexplainable to this very day happened. In the evening, Ben Padilla was observed together with another Congolese, identified as John Mutantu, a mechanic to have boarded the plane together. A few minutes later, by some strange occurrence, the plane's engine roared to life, something that was done without following the necessary procedural requirements. This gigantic jetliner started moving on the runway. The Boeing had no working lights, and there was no signal from the control tower for the takeoff. Padilla and Mutantu suddenly found themselves in the air. The unfortunate incident was that the plane was never seen again. There were many reported cases of immediate search and rescue missions, but unfortunately, the plane was never seen again. Some hypotheses of speculations, which were presented in theory, began to arise, each horrific than beside. Could it be that the plane was stolen for an act of terrorism? Was it the case of hijacking gone wrong? Or maybe something much more sinister? Although investigations have been conducted by different agencies, no concrete evidence has been produced. It was later reported that initially when the Boeing 727-233 proceeded to swing and strobe entering the runway area, radio tower officers tried to make contact with the aircraft, but did not receive an answer back. Just before takeoff, the aircraft was refueled and now carried 14,000 gallons of jet fuel, giving it a flying range of about 1,500 miles. It could only get so far. It left the airport with lights and transponders switched off and flew to Burkina Faso. The last transmission was for landing in Seychelles, but there was no confirmation of these locations. The voice which asked permission of landing was also not identified. The disappearance of the airliner sparked widespread media coverage. According to early accounts, the jet was on its route to Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa. Then other publications stated that the jet had made contact with an airfield in the Seychelles, an island country off Africa's east coast. The jet supposedly asked permission to land on the main island, but it never did. However, Seychelles officials denied that they had heard anything from the missing 727. In either case, the jet would have needed to refuel somewhere on Africa's continent before arriving at either destination. However, no country confessed to sighting the aircraft, let alone refueling it. Ben had a license in aircraft mechanics, flight engineers, but it's not possible that he could fly a Boeing 727, neither could his teammate John. Furthermore, to fly, 3 people are needed to operate the plane, but only 2 people were present at that time. Maury Joseph, who was the owner of the plane, is said to have been involved in document forgery and investor fraud, so the American authorities assumed that this was financial scam, whereas Joseph disagrees and thinks that this was the terrorists hijacking. Ben is now considered deceased, and the FBI wrapped the case in 2005. The aircraft and Padilla disappeared on May 25, 2003. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the plane or its occupants has ever been found. So the question still lingers to this day. Had the plane been stolen for a covert operation? The family of Ben Charles Padilla still hopes to receive the news of their long-lost family member. The haunting question lingers. What could have happened on that haunting night of 2003 that led the men to disappear without a trace?